for a 2020 AP History exam, European, US, and the world. And I am Dr. P. Dominique Padurano, the president and founder of Crimson Coaching. Oops, sorry. I need to just toggle over to here. There we go. So welcome. Thank you for being here. So who am I? I was an AP US history teacher for many years, a social studies teacher for many years, and I also was an AP reader, which means that I scored the exams, a table leader after a couple of years after that, and then an exam leader. So I helped write the rubric and the standards by which the essays would be graded. So I am kind of steeped in AP history culture. But right now, in 2014, I founded Crimson Coaching, which is a test prep, academic tutoring, and college consulting business. And some people ask me why Crimson. My alma mater is Harvard, and that's their color. So hence Crimson Coaching. I developed this talk because, as many of you know, the AP exams are very different this year because of coronavirus. So I'll talk a little bit about the AP program in general, and then a lot about the changes this year and how I think as an AP teacher, a student can best study for the exam. So tonight's agenda will be a short sort of webinar with PowerPoint slides, and then I'll open it up for Q&A at the end. Of course, if you have any questions, you can always throw them in the chat. I will try my best to answer them as they come up, but if I don't worry, I'll definitely check them when I'm all done at the end during the Q&A. And so before we start, just a little note, I'm sure many of you have been on many Zoom calls during the past 6 weeks, but just in case you haven't, it's probably easiest if you mute yourself so that the background noise doesn't kind of come in while I'm speaking. And then when we go into Q&A, absolutely feel free to unmute yourself, because I love to actually get your voice and hear from people directly. So, let's just talk first of all, when are the AP history exams and makeup exams? Those will be in parentheses. The European one, if you're not sure, European history is Wednesday, May 13th at 4 p.m. Eastern. The makeup is on Tuesday, June 2nd at 2 p.m. The US is Friday, May 15th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And the makeup is Wednesday, June 3rd at 12 p.m. Eastern. And the world is Thursday, May 21st, 2 p.m. Eastern. And the makeup is Thursday, June 4th at 12 p.m. Eastern. It's really important, if you live in a different time zone, make sure to adjust correctly. And you can always just check that on the AP's website, which is collegeboard.org. For security reasons, the exam is being given at the exact same moment across the globe. And you know that the AP exams are given globally. So that's why the times are a little bit different this year. I was on a webinar with the whole head of the AP program, Trevor Packer, and he has said that he's going to promise, or he's going to try rather, to
it's all good.
Hi, could the person who just entered mute yourself? Would that be possible? We're hearing a lot of noise from your phone or a computer. I think that might be Rory. So they're going to try to release their scores in early July, which is when the scores are usually released. Of course, the reading is going, and I'll talk about the reading and how the exams are scored later on, but it's going to be very different this year. And so he can't promise that they'll be that the scores will be released in early July. So let's just talk for a little bit very briefly about what an AP history course is. The AP history course roughly corresponds to a whole year survey of either US history, European history, or world history. What why take that exam? Well, the purpose of the exam is really to demonstrate your passion for that subject. So, for example, most high school students would not necessarily take a college course in, say, European history unless they were really passionate about it. Another reason to do that is to distinguish yourself from other students in your school, in your community, and across the world when you take this exam that's graded on a scale of 1 to 5, to show sort of how well you mastered the content and the skills that the AP course is teaching. It used to be back in ancient days when I was in college that some students could amass so many AP credits that they would enter college as a sophomore rather than as a freshman. That's really unlikely to happen these days. A lot of colleges have kind of geared away from that, and that's kind of outside the purview of why that happened. But it is a great chance to say, place out of a more basic prerequisite and go into a more advanced course, especially if you're getting up in the 4 to 5 range. So these are my beliefs about why this year's exam, as different as it is more important than ever before. First, this is the very first time that your school teacher, the teacher who has taught you this course, will receive your essay. I'm not sure if students and parents appreciate that. In the past, I would receive my students' test booklet, and when they drew on their test booklet, I would see that, and then I would ask the kid, why the heck weren't you writing your essay? Why did you, make all these witches when the question was about the Puritans? But this year, they're going to be able to get the essay themselves. And the College Board is actually recommending that schools grant students extra credit based on how well they do on that exam. So that's kind of really exciting, I think, for students, and should be more of an incentive to study hard. Also, down the road, I believe that for the high school class of 2021, meaning this year's juniors, for whom the SAT, for example, was canceled in many places in March and then everywhere in May and June. So many students, juniors, haven't taken the classic standardized test and may not do so until August if they're planning on taking it. The AP, the IB, the SAT2 may become the new ways for colleges to compare students to one another. And so I personally believe that as the SAT and ACT really wane in importance, and they have been waning in importance over the past 10 years, and this year we've seen an exponential number of colleges say that they are going to be test optional for students applying this fall, meaning those juniors. The AP may be more important. And so if you are a freshman, sophomore, or junior in high school, I would also think really carefully about perhaps taking another AP course next year, because if the SAT and ACT aren't used to judge students against one another, this may become a new barometer. So an important question is, how will the colleges actually view this year's exam? And when you see how different it is from the old exam, I think it's a valid question to ask. Trevor Packer, again, who's the head of the College Board, has asserted that elite public and private universities have come out in support of both the validity of this exam, meaning it is a valid exam to compare to what students in college would be doing, as well as is the security of the exams. And we're going to talk about that, the security, a little bit later. And many governors of state universities have mandated that those universities must accept AP credit on the same basis as last year. So if you're worried about, oh, why bother taking it? The colleges may not accept it. I actually wouldn't have that worry at all. So, changes to this year's exam. Hopefully by now you have heard that the history exams, European, US, and world, will be a document-based question essay only. There's no multiple choice. That scares a lot of students, but I don't think it needs to, because the multiple choice is actually corresponds historically, statistically very closely to how students do on the DBQ anyway. And so this year you're just doing the DBQ, and really that's because of security reasons. Multiple choice questions would be too difficult to administer for a home exam, because students could just Google the answer for that. A DBQ, an essay, it's going to be much more difficult basically for a student to cheat. Because of security reasons, the time during which the essays have will be allotted have shrunk. And so because of that, they've shrunk the number of documents that will be on the DBQ. So there used to be 7. Now there are only 4 text-based documents, and those docs are usually a bit shorter than you may be used to. And there's 1 non-text document, so either a painting, a print, a political cartoon, something like that. You will have a total of 45 minutes to read the documents and write, and then another 5 minutes to upload the exam. And there will be a timer when those 45 minutes are up telling you to upload. Because the exam's online, you can now either type or handwrite the exam. And I would absolutely, I'm coaching privately a young man in Virginia who's taking the AP World exam, and we've been talking about how important it is to do practice DBQ essays and see how fast you could do it typing versus writing. See how strong of an essay you can get typing versus writing. You do not want, May to be the first time you're trying this. The other changes to this year's exam is the content that will be covered on the exam. So because the College Board is basically considering this a truncated school year, they're also truncating the amount of material that will be covered. So for European history, this means you will only be tested. The DBQ can only come from units 1 through 7, which is about the Renaissance to 1900. For US, it's units 3 through 7, which is 1754 to 1945. You may use 1 and 2 or 8 and 9 as context, just like you could also in Euro use 8 and 9 or 9 as context, but you don't need to worry that that will be either in the documents or in the question. And finally, the World History exam will cover units 1 through 6, which is the period 1200 to 1900. And again, you can use the other units for context if you wish. So I'm really sorry. I tried to make each little column here have an animation, but it's all a big chunk. So I know it's a lot of text all at once, but we're going to go through each one one at a time. So some things you want to consider on test day. Clearly, this is an open book test, but you need to know the basics of the content in order to do well on this, because 45 minutes is a really short amount of time. So if you are, flipping back in your notes going, oh God, what was the Renaissance about again? It's going to be really hard to write a good essay. In addition, if you go on Wikipedia and say, what was the Renaissance again? That's actually more dire because the College Board hasn't told teachers what the security kind of, I hate to say it, but spies are, but somehow in their software, they claim they will know if you go on Wikipedia or you otherwise try to collaborate with somebody else. And they have said that they will provide universities with lists of cheaters and attempted cheaters. So just don't do it. It's much better to study in advance. You want to log on with your exam ticket about 15 to 30 minutes before the exam start time. And that ticket you can find either in your email or in your College Board student account that you had to create at the beginning of the year. The biggest worry that Trevor Packard talked about with students was actually Wi-Fi access, like would the students, broadband work, and students not paying attention to the timer when they need to upload the essay. So I would say, if you even have an alarm on your phone or you want to set an egg timer or something like that to get you to pay attention when those 45 minutes are up and you need to start uploading, that's something that you might want to do. If, for instance, you had a power outage, you had a sibling raging, crying in the background, something happened that prevented you from actually either uploading your exam or finishing or starting in the first place, there will be a form for you to fill out that will enable you to say that and request a makeup. And you will be notified by email the week of May 26th if your request has been approved. Sorry. So, how will the DBQ be graded? Well, every year, the essays are graded by real live people. I don't know whether students really appreciate that. This year, the DBQ, because everything is riding on this one essay, two real AP teachers or college professors who teach the equivalent of that course will score your exam. Usually it's just one AP reader per essay because, for something like, in traditionally, when I was doing the exam leading of AP US history, the students had to write 3 essays and there were 350,000 students taking the test. And so that was over 1 million essays that needed to be graded by actual teachers in just a week's time. And so we would only grade one at a time. But now there's only one essay, so your essay will be graded twice. And if there's a large discrepancy between one grade and the other, a third person, probably somebody more higher up the chain, like a table leader, an exam leader, will be brought in to weigh in case there is that large discrepancy. And, a lot of times students are just sort of say like, well, how could, this be fair? Because, one teacher might be a really hard grader, another teacher will be a really easy grader. But I want to assure you, as having been somebody who trained other teachers to read these exams and score these exams, exam leaders like me, we would spend a full week prior to the reading developing standards and figuring out the best ways to most fairly evaluate every kid. And then we would spend 2 full days training table leaders, and those table leaders would spend a full day training their readers. So there's a lot of training going on, and that training is all meant to assure that everybody is graded by the same standards. And just in case, you're worried, People who are table leaders and exam leaders like me would often back read, which meant that we went back and made sure that those readers were locked into the standards. So I have to say it is a very fair reading process. However, people are human, and I want to give you the sort of bird's eye, backdoor look into this process. Many of my readers could read upwards of 500 essays in a single day, which means they're spending less than a minute on your essay. And I would always tell my students that imagine you are the last essay that somebody reads in the last half hour of the day on the last day of the reading. They are exhausted because they have read thousands of essays from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. over the course of that reading. So please make it really easy for them to find your thesis. Put it in the last sentence of the intro. Have really crystal clear topic sentences in the first sentence of every body paragraph. Do not make that reader have to search for it. They will, but I'm just saying, people are human. They get tired, and in some, you want to make it as easy as possible to get all the points that you deserve. So what will the rubric assess? And this, I will confess, is not my writing. It comes directly from the collegeboard.org website. And if you want to look at the rubric more in detail there, you can do so. So the first thing is that you have to respond to the prompt with a historically defensible thesis. The second thing is you need to describe a broader historical context relevant to that prompt. You need to support an argument using at least 4 documents. I always recommend that my students try to use all of them when they can, because what if you kind of misread one document? Then at least, if you misread one and you have 4 others, then maybe you can get both points for that. Use at least two pieces of specific historical evidence beyond that what's in the document. I call that outside information. For at least 2 documents, explain how or why the document's point of view, historical situation, and our audience is relevant to an argument. And I want to just talk about this for a second. And I really got this insight through helping this boy down in Virginia. Students should not believe everything they read. So we were working on a DBQ that was about the Industrial Revolution for AP World History. And there was a document from 1797 in which the writer, who was from the Society for the Betterment of the Poor, was talking about how wonderful this society or this factory was, and all the kids were clothed and fed and educated and were working in the safe environment. And basically, it was a load of propaganda, I believe. And so the student kind of took it at face value, but you really need, this is where the context really comes in. If you know that the period 1750 to 1800 in England was kind of the, however you want to look at it, the high point or the lowest point for workers of the Industrial Revolution, and this document came from 1797, you then need to say, could this author have been writing this to kind of trick poor peasants from the countryside to move to London or move to Manchester in order to make them believe that their children would be treated well in these factories, when actually we know the children were abused and treated horribly during that time. So that point of view and audience is really key, and will often help you distinguish yourself from the middle of the road student. The student who gets that is the student who often will get those top scores. And you want to use evidence, of course, to corroborate, qualify, or modify an argument. So what's the best way to study, especially if you've been out of school for 6 weeks and you've got 700 years worth of history and the entire world to study, or a lot of little details in US history, over 200 years of history, or 500 years of European history. I believe because the exams are taking place roughly in 2 weeks, the best thing to do is learn the general context of each of the units covered, not in your textbook. It's way too much. The college textbook will have way too much detail that you will never be able to master. Get a good review book. You should also familiarize yourself with old as well as new DBQs at collegeboard.org. They were supposed to put out this week newer DBQs that have just like those 5 documents and that don't have the old 7 document. But even if you want to try 1 DBQ per unit and the other ones have 7, that's fine. It's just like training, maybe for a marathon and you run 45 miles so that when you actually have to run 26.2, it seems easy. What's the best way to get to Carnegie Hall? Practice. So what's the best way to write a DBQ essay that scores a lot of points? Write DBQ essays. Now this next one I think is tough, right? If you have a teacher that is willing to give you feedback on DBQs, great. Definitely get that and then go write some more. If you don't, that this is what I do. I love to geek out reading and teaching history one-on-one with kids. So of course you can always give me a call too. So this is the process that I encourage my students to use to write the DBQ essay. And let me just preface this by saying that if your teacher has given you a process that works for you and you're currently getting all the points, great. I always say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if you either don't have a process, nobody's ever taught you how, or if that process isn't really working for you, try this one. The first step is to read and understand the question. And I know this sounds like, well, duh, but you would be shocked at how many hundreds and thousands of essays I've read over the course of my AP reading experiences and just being a classroom teacher, where kids think or want to write on a different question, or they thought you were going to ask one thing, and then they don't know how to pivot. If you write a great essay on a different question, you're not going to get points. So you must take, and I recommend taking at least 60 seconds to just stare at that question and make sure you understand what that question is asking before you go on to step 2, which is to make a graphic organizer that responds to that question. Now, there's certain historical thinking skills that the AP history exams will test. Classic history skill, cause effect, right? So if you have a cause effect question, you might want to have 2 columns. Or you could have a before, during, and after, like this student's DBQ. Basically, the question was, what was the effect of the Industrial Revolution on workers in Britain? So we had a before Industrial Revolution, during Industrial Revolution, and after Industrial Revolution column. This is key because it's really easy to just rush to those documents and lose sight of the question. But if you have a graphic organizer that you designed around that question, it's less likely you're going to lose sight of that question. I know you're all thinking the documents is the next step, but it's not. It's not until step 4. Step 3 is to fill in the graphic organizer with outside information, with that evidence beyond the documents. A lot of kids will forget this step because they rush to the documents, but if you make sure to do it first, you're less likely to forget. Now, my students would always say, Dr. P, but what if we don't know any outside information, or if we forgot it all? And then I say, well, of course. I mean, then you can't fill it in. But at least you've stopped and you've thought about it before reading the documents and adding any notes as you go to that graphic organizer. And I will just say, sometimes when you start reading those documents, the cobwebs get cleared from your mind and you begin to remember, oh yeah, that piece of outside information. So put that down now too. And then finally, step 5, of course, is writing the essay. If you have any time left over, of course, you could rewrite it, but most likely you probably won't have time. So I know that my little icon is a pilot because he's got the little wings there, but it was the closest thing to a bus driver I could find. So the analogy of writing the DBQ essay, or any essay, in fact, that I always give my students is, you are driving the bus. Sorry, I can't even read. So your ideas should be what's dictating the structure that that essay takes, right? Nothing else. The essay itself is like a bus, and you are the driver of that bus. Oops, sorry. The documents, they're just passengers in the back along for the ride, but they are not saying we take a left turn here and a right turn there. So it's really clear that you drill down. That's why my process revolves steps 1 through 3, not on the documents, because it's way too easy to write an essay where essentially it's document 1 says this, document 2 says that, document 3 says that, and so on and so forth. And that's not an argument at all. So that's pretty much all I have for you. I did just want to tell you about a couple of other things before I open it up to questions. I know that especially if your child is a junior, they are going into this summer that is really crucial for them, and actually for any student. I really believe that setting goals is key to kind of being the driver of your own bus of life. And so I've written an ebook that I have on my website that you can download for free at www.crimsoncoaching.com on goal setting, and it's got worksheets in there that you can use. If you sign up for my monthly newsletter, where I also share tips like these every once in a while, that's on the homepage of the website. You scroll all the way to the bottom, and you sign up for that. And then you'll also get notified on other webinars that I'm giving. Like on May 14th, I'm giving a webinar on college planning during and after Corona quarantine. And on May 21st, I'm also giving a webinar on taming teen anxiety. And if you like my Facebook page, you'll also get notifications about those. And of course, if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, which I hope to kind of be more active on, you will also get little itty bitty videos like this. So before I get to questions, I do just want to thank very much the Pearl River Library for hosting me, and Emily Dowie in particular, the young adult librarian, for really championing teens at that library and being the hostess for tonight's webinar. And if you found that this was useful to you, I'd be so appreciative if you could give me a Google review, which you can do by Googling Crimson Coaching LLC and scrolling down to write a review way down there. So that's really all I have. I would love to kind of now hear from all of you if any of you have any questions. So I'm just going to say, feel free to just jump in and unmute yourself if you have a question.
Hi.
Hi.
So I was wondering, I've been starting to review for the test, and I was wondering how many like practice DBQs would be like an appropriate number to study before the test.
That's a great question. What's your name?
Griffin.
Griffin, hi. So Griffin, you can keep yourself unmuted for a second because I'm just going to ask you a couple of other questions. Have you been writing DBQs throughout the school year?
Yeah, I think I wrote 2 or 3.
Okay. And how were you doing on those?
I don't know. I think I got like a 4 or a 5 out of 7, right? It's out of 7.
Okay. So I would try to say, I would definitely try to do, and I know that it's really hard, right? Because you're still going to school probably during the day. I would definitely say you should do a minimum of 3 and a maximum however many you could do. There's a lot of which exam are you taking?
AP World.
Okay, so I mean, for all of these subjects, there's a lot of resources out there. Are you familiar with the College Board website?
Yeah, I've been on it a few times.
Okay, so do you know how to go and find the old DBQs that are there?
Yes, I've looked at those a few times.
Yeah, so I would try when you're picking them out, try to pick ones out on a subject that you haven't yet written on or a unit that you haven't yet written on. So let's say your teacher gave you a DBQ in units 1, 3, and 5. I would definitely start with 2, 4, and 6. And if you can, go from there. And I get that sometimes, DBQs also span more than one unit, so that's fine. But that's sort of how I would pick out the ones. And the other thing, if you're lucky enough to have a teacher who will give you feedback, it's also not a bad idea to rewrite a DBQ. So this one boy that I've been working with, it was his third DBQ, and he really sort of wasn't sort of getting the concept that I was trying to teach him. And so we went over it again, and I said, you know what, I'd like you to go back and rewrite it. And rewriting in one way is an artificial experience because now he's thought about this DBQ for hours, whereas you'll only have a few minutes. But it's still a really good skill to think about doing, especially if you can then incorporate your teacher's feedback on what you sort of why you didn't get those 3 top points, and then you go back and you try it again. Does that make sense, Griffin?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Anybody else have questions? Was there anything in the chat, Emily, that I missed? Because I don't actually think I can see the chat now.
Let me check. I don't see anything else in the chat.
Yeah.
I just wanted to tell everyone,
Sure.
because I know I don't see anyone here from Prover Library, but you can all check out Prover Library's website, Prover proverlibrary.org, because we offer programs and you don't have to be like a patron of the library. You can be from anywhere, because we offer webinars like this. I mean, we're also doing the Taming Anxiety for Teens webinar that Dr. P is doing. So if you want to do that webinar, if you want to register for that, the registration link, like that's actually on our website right now if you want to register. So please check out our website. We also have a YouTube channel. We're really trying to do our best to serve the community in this time. And I kind of feel like, you know, everyone's part of our community. So that's why I'm saying to please check out our website.
That's great, Emily. Any other AP history questions? Oh, here's one in the chat. Oh, you're very welcome, Colin. Well, oh, sure.
Yeah, sorry. I had one more question. So,
sure, Griffin.
The main spot where I've been losing points was with the historical context, and I feel like I have trouble making like broader conclusions. So I was wondering if you have like any suggestions for that.
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? And I think AP World is, out of these three courses, maybe among the most difficult to do that, because the AP, excuse me, one moment. The AP World textbooks are so dense and they have such, you know, minutia of content in there, and you can really get lost in the trees and it's tough to see the forest. So what I recommend even more strongly for you is to get a good review book. I personally always use Princeton review books when I'm working with students, because I feel like they're pretty clear and intelligible, and they don't get, like I often find Kaplan gets bogged down in a lot of details. You want to really have the fewest details possible almost, because the context is not about details. The details you can get from the documents, right? But if you are having a tough time of making a broad historical claim, then a review book is really where you want to go.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Christine mentioned, I just jumped over to Amazon and found a handful of test prep books. Is there one in particular that you recommend? Yeah, so definitely I recommend the Princeton Review. And I do not get any kickbacks from Princeton Review, just so that you know. It is just, you know, in my years of teaching this material and tutoring it. Another question in the chat. Thanks, just one click ordered. Awesome, you're welcome, Christine. Any other questions that anybody has? Oops. I'm gonna just stop the sharing because I just unfortunately jumped off my PowerPoint. And, you know, by the way, if you think of a question that, you know, right after you click off, I'm happy to answer a question by email if you want. You have my website address there. There's a contact form on the website, and you can also just email me at info@crimsoncoaching.com. I'd be happy. Or if your child has a question, you know, I'm happy to answer that too. Would it be possible to share your slides with us? I'll tell you what. So Wendy, I am going to put the whole video on YouTube. So if you'd like, hopefully in a couple of days, I just have to edit it a little bit because we're recording. Check on my YouTube channel in a couple of days, and while you're there, subscribe so that way when new videos go up, you can get notified of them too. And Emily just put in, you're welcome, Mundy. Emily just put the library's website, pearlriverlibrary.org, too, where you can go to register for that other Taming Teen Anxiety webinar that I'm giving on the 21st of May. And I'm sure they have lots of other great programs too. It's a great place. If there are no other questions, I sort of feel like 1 hour is usually, you're welcome, Christine. 1 hour is usually people's max for Zoom calls, so I won't belabor the point. Thank you again all for showing up after a long day of work and parenting and all the other stuff you're doing. So it was really great to sort of virtually meet you, and I hope to see you again. Thank you.